Welcome to the Niche Pursuits podcast. Today, we are joined by Ewen Finser, who is with Venture Forth Media and ContentTeams.io. Now, today is about building websites, but building them at scale. Ewan has created a team where they are building hundreds of websites per year in bursts or in blasts, as you call it. And he's working with investors, obviously, to fund and grow these websites. And so he takes us down the rabbit trail of how to build websites at scale, and probably more importantly, all the different insights that he has learned when he builds hundreds of websites. A lot to learn here, so don't get turned off if you're just a single site operator, or if you're just side hustling your way with an affiliate site or whatnot, because Ewan just has so many great tips for everything from niche validation to E.A.T to building content teams and beyond. Again, he shares his 3-step process on how to validate a niche. And again, he's done a lot of niche evaluation over the years. What he's learned from sites that work and sites that don't work. He talks about the exact process they follow for publishing content out of the gate, how they validate which niches are working and which aren't. Keyword research and whether to go all in on a topic or go after low competition keywords. He talks about a concept that he calls firing bullets and then cannonballs. I think you're gonna like that one. It applies to all of us. We get into monetization and affiliate marketing, some different ad hacks. I love the conversation we had about deploying video to your site. He has some really smart ways to do it in a low-cost manner and a way that gets you paid back for it really quickly. And how to look at data. You know, we spend a lot of time talking about the insights that he gets from all the data that he has in front of him. Again, it's a really fun conversation, and I'm going to guess the majority of you who are listening to this podcast probably have no aspirations of starting hundreds of websites, but you can learn so much from someone who has started hundreds of websites. And I think that's the real value that we get out of today's interview. Enjoy. Have you been frustrated with your Google traffic lately? Are you tired of tools that make you search through millions of keywords and require a math degree to figure out? There's an SEO tool called RankIQ that can help. They're ranked #1 on G2 for both ease of use and customer satisfaction. RankIQ gives you a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, and they are all clear winners. When you choose one of their hand-picked keywords, their AI takes over and gives you a simple report telling you what Google wants you to cover in your blog post. Whether you have a new site or have been around for a while, RankIQ will take your Google traffic to a whole new level. Go to rankiq.com/niche pursuits to lock yourself in at 50% off their monthly rate. I'll put this special link in the episode's description. Hey, Jared here. Today's episode is sponsored by OneLittleWeb.com, a bespoke link building service provider trusted by hundreds of niche site business owners just like you. OneLittleWeb manually handpicks real and relevant sites for guest post backlinks that receive at least 5,000 monthly organic visitors from Google. The best part is that you can check the quality of the sites and approve or ask for replacements until you get the desired domains for your guest posts. So we've arranged an exclusive welcome offer for Niche Pursuits listeners, where you'll get a free DA40 backlink on your first order of a DA50 backlink. So again, you'll love OneLittleWeb because A, they guarantee guest post backlinks with 5,000 plus monthly organic traffic sites. B, they let you review the sites beforehand and approve them. C, they write a 1,000-word, well-researched content post for every single guest post. So go to onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits to claim your free DA40 backlink today. Again, that's ONELITTLEWEB.com/niche pursuits. Welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today I am joined by Ewen Finser. Ewan, welcome on board.
Great to be here, Jared.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about sites, but we're going to be talking about websites at scale. And I'm talking serious scale here. I don't want to overbury the lead, but you have a great story that's going to culminate really in us talking about how, as an agency and a media company, you're tackling building sites at scale and with investors. So many great threads we're going to dive down. But before we do, give us a background and really how you got to the point where you're at right now.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, like so many in the audience, got started trying to look for alternatives, right? Alternatives to the career path. A lot of the stuff that actually Spencer talks about back in the day about, his day job in the cubicle. And it's a funny serendipity now that back in 2011, 2012, I was listening to Spencer Niche Pursuits podcast and getting inspiration from his story about building niche sites. And that was what I kind of attached myself to that narrative, and then, started that side hustle. So way back in 2011, I had gotten started with kind of dabbling online, selling different things on Amazon, selling textbooks when I was in college. So I had been exposed to kind of this idea of e-commerce, really. But then I quickly grew a little bit bored of the routine of trying to find inventory, buy textbooks, or sell them online. That was kind of a very time intensive process. And so I was looking at some other ways I could earn kind of income. And then I noticed that Amazon had an associates program. I was like, well, what is this? And then kind of went down that rabbit hole. And then I realized that we could earn money while we sleep. And I think that's the truth to passive income. It's not really passive. It's just you can earn it asynchronously to when you put the effort in. So that was very exciting. And I, spun up a couple niche sites, and then, graduated from college, had maybe a few $100 a month from these little passive income sites, and got a traditional day job as a technical recruiter, working in kind of a more of, I wouldn't say Fortune 500, but working with Fortune 500 clients in a corporate setting, right? And while it was, great to get that job, it was a great experience, I quickly realized that, I wasn't cut out for that. I kind of looked around and I realized that, a lot of the people that were kind of quote unquote successful are doing the same thing that I was doing at the time. So I was looking at like, wow, 20 years of this seems like a lot. So started working, more on the websites as a mechanism to potentially quit the day job. And I remember one time, this is very, very pivotal in my brain, because I was like, well, I don't have enough time, working all hours. How do I work on this side hustle? I remember my wife saying at the time, we had just gotten married, why don't you just stop at a Starbucks or Panera Bread, and rather than sit in New Jersey traffic for an hour and a half on the way home, just sit in the Starbucks and work on the sites, and then come home after when there was less traffic. So that's kind of what I did for a period of, I'd say 6 to 9 months to get traction, and then was able to get it to a point where, at the time it was enough as a young married guy with no kids. 2,000 to 3,000 a month was like, wow, that's close to, it's not quite replacing the day job, but it's a sizable, it can pay the rent type thing. So was able to quit the day job back in 2014, 2015 timeframe, and achieve this like lifestyle nirvana, I think, that a lot of people look for in this space. Passive income, replaced my day job. It was kind of a solo operation. I had some freelance writers, but it was probably like many in the audience, it was kind of doing it myself. I did that for a while. It was great. I could work whenever I wanted to, have that lifestyle freedom. But then like after maybe a year or two of that, I kind of realized that, I was missing something. I was like, what if we kind of push this a little bit further? We're generating a lot of good free cash flow. What if I started reinvesting, and what if we scaled the team a little bit? And so I started gradually and very organically bringing on kind of project managers, editors, things like that would people that would make my life easier, and kind of got to the point where we grew up into more of I call it a boutique media company. So I'll kind of stop there because that kind of brings us up to 2016, 17. But we started to basically build a team. And so that was kind of, I guess, my evolution from escaping the cubicle to kind of starting a boutique media company.
I love your definition of passive income. I've never heard it put that way, and I think it's perfect. Like, it's not about earning money without working. It's really just about earning money at a different time than you put in the work in some way. But it doesn't mean that you get to just, necessarily sit on a beach like we all maybe thought when we first started this game. That and your
Exactly.
wife is also one very smart woman to recommend that you sit out traffic and get some work done in the meantime. That's great. So thanks for bringing us up to speed. I mean, you kind of had I guess maybe a classic journey into the website building and affiliate marketing space. I realize that everyone's journey is a little different, but you certainly kind of check the boxes of dabbling in some form of side hustle, getting it a day job, and then pushing yourself by working on the side to eventually get to the point where you're able to leave that. What type of site or sites did you have when you kind of first started in this affiliate marketing space? Like, where are those sites today? Do you still have them?
We still have actually a couple of them.
Okay.
It's funny enough. We sold a couple. We have a couple. Some didn't, I wouldn't say pan out. Like very early on, right? I kind of went down the rabbit hole with the internet marketers of, the micro niche site, which was kind of all the rage back then,
Yep.
using like buying PBN links. And I quickly realized after an update early on that that wasn't very sustainable. So then I kind of took the approach of, what, I'm not even going to worry about this whole off-page stuff, this link building, like I'm going to forget about that and just focus on quality content. And not to say that our content was always amazing, right? Because it's kind of an evolving process. But by taking the focus off of like manipulation and SEO tactics and more on a long-term strategy, we were able to kind of put our heads down and take a long-term view. So yeah, I mean, some of the sites back in the day were micro niche sites, but then we started evolving. So we kind of went more kind of authority site, larger site. And it's kind of interesting because I think now it's not full circle, but I'm coming back to a thesis around relatively targeted niche authority sites, which might be an interesting distinction. But yeah, some of the sites still do exist. So it's not like these were churn and burns.
Okay. Good. Well, very good. I want to ask you a quick question before we dive into, like you said, 2017 and beyond, catching us up today. And I think maybe you could speak to it a little bit. Like, it seems like if you were to sample the pool of people who have walked away from their day job and are building websites full time, you get almost two different types of people. You get the person that is really very happy to build on their own. Maybe they have a writer or two that they're working with, but really it's a solo operation. And then you get the people who leave that day job, do this full time, and kind of go down the route of building out more of a media company or more of a team, right? And they have writers, they have an editor, and they kind of manage that. For you, it seems like you dabbled in both. You started with doing it mostly on your own and then transitioned into having more of a team. Just curious, what caused that switch? Was it something you kind of had to learn about yourself, or was that always a goal that you knew you'd go there one day?
No, it was not always a goal, and sometimes I said the grass is always greener a little bit. Like I sometimes, when we're dealing with really difficult challenges or something, or work with investors or something, sometimes I pine for the day when I just had one side, it was just myself, and I didn't have when you have employees, when you have a team, you have an obligation really to them. And that's what I feel. So that it does change things, right? Because you're not just thinking about your own kind of selfish desires anymore. You're also thinking about how do we keep the team growing? Because these people are very important. They become important to you, or at least to me. And so yeah, it was kind of a little bit of a light bulb moment. And I think there's many paths, right? And I still see people today who actually just have one site or two sites or whatever, and they're solo operators and they do most of the content themselves. Still, they create fantastic multi-million-dollar businesses in the content space. And that's what I love about this space. You have those stories, and then you kind of have the approach that we evolved into, which is having 150 plus websites across different portfolios with distributed teams. And so it was more of a I think it was, for me, it was looking at the opportunity that, and I still see this today in the space, even after all these years, how much blue sky opportunity that still exists, even if it is a little bit more competitive. There's so many verticals, so many sites that need to be created, in my opinion, and so many big content footprints that need to be disaggregated, and we can get more into that. So it was really a function of, there's all this opportunity, there's this kind of unmet demand. How do we get to where we want to go faster? But I still, have, I guess, a foot in both camp, in the sense of I still like getting into the weeds with the sites, doing keyword research. I'm a practitioner as well as as like more of the strategy side. So I try to keep my feet in both camps. But yeah, it was really a function of how do we bring more content brands to market and in a faster period of time. And that led us to the team. And that also led us to the investors.
Yeah, no, you bring up a good point. Both work. Both work. It's just fascinating to kind of, I think maybe actually add that point of definition for people listening. Like both can work. Like there isn't one ultimate. You don't have to end up managing a collection of 150 websites, which, by the way, transitions us nicely into what you are doing, which is managing a lot of websites. So let's transition into where you're at today. You know, you kind of stopped the journey at 2017. I think you said we've got about 5 more years to catch up on to where you are now, which is, again, running and operating a lot of websites, both for yourself and for your investors.
Yeah, so I think around 2017, I'd say one pivotal moment was 2015. After I'd been out of the day job for about a year, I joined this group called the Rhodium Community, which I think actually Spencer's a part of as well. It's a great group run by Chris Yates, who's a good friend of mine, and like full of all the people in there are mentors and friends. So that was a key moment because it kind of introduced me to a wider ecosystem, kind of like this podcast too. If there's other people out there, but it's more of a kind of bi-directional experience where you're not only just engaging with the podcast, you're also participating in a community. And so that was pivotal because it introduced me to people that were doing things at scale, other e-com ventures, SaaS. And then through that group in 2017, kind of met up with, was connected to some investors or family office that was interested in kind of investing in the space. And so back then, it was interesting evolution because at the time I thought, I'm building sites because one day I want to get to a point where I can go out and I can buy sites. And like, at the time there was Wired Investors. This was back in maybe 2016. And there's a couple other kind of funds out there. And man, they were doing exciting things. This idea that, it's easy, it's just as easy to build as it is to operate an established website. So we kind of pooled some capital. We went out and my thesis was, okay, I'm done with the building phase. Now I'm going to go out and do the M&A stuff because that's what everyone does when they grow up. And we quickly realized that we had some sites that worked out well and some sites were kind of break even. We had like at least one that sticks in my mind that was like a 90% value reduction within a year from where we purchased it. I think it was like 250K down to like almost zero. And so that was kind of like a scarring experience. But I think it's important to talk about this because I think a lot of times, the failures are not really discussed, but that failure inspired me to reevaluate the thesis around M&A. Is that really the best approach? And so I kind of went into the wilderness, did some reading. I read this book called Good to Great by Jim Collins, and big fan of his work. And one of the concepts there's a bunch of them, but one of them I stuck to was this idea of fire bullets and then cannonballs. This idea that you shouldn't put all of your eggs into one basket. You should really do an empirical validation exercise before committing to the full strategy. And so I said, what if we did this for websites? And rather than do M&A, what if we returned to our roots and did ground up sites, but we did it in a very organized and disciplined fashion where we allocated capital at the same interval across multiple sites from day zero. And then we measured the results and doubled down on the ones that were showing signs of progress. So with that in mind, we kind of in 2019, after some of these failures with M&A, formed a pilot program with 10 sites. We took $250,000 and we launched these de novo vanilla domains, nothing fancy, no expired domains. And we basically had an allocation strategy where we tried to get over 120 articles for each site within 6 months. And then we kind of let them sit, let them get through the sandbox, did I'd say some outreach for like kind of Haro or White Hat kind of link building. And then really waited until a year. And then at that 1 year mark, we kind of looked back at the sites and said, okay, we had all these assumptions, we had all these theories about which sites would be good. I think I'm great at picking niches, but I'm frequently surprised at what I don't know. And so this mechanism kind of enforces humility into the process. And so we got to that 1 year mark, we doubled down on the winners. So we reserved some of the capital where we probably went out the door with 60% of our capital allocation. So we had $250,000. We allocated 60% of that into 10 sites, got them over 100 articles each. Then we found the winners. Maybe there's 4 or 5 of them that were doing really, really well in that cohort. And we doubled down with the remaining capital on those. And that kind of led us to an optimal growth. And by the 2 year mark, we were at essentially a 2x asset value relative to the $250,000 that we had invested. So, at that point, we were able to say, well, if we know nothing else, we know that over a 2 year period, we can kind of double our double our money if we were to go sell these things. And so that was enough validation for me to say, let's go do this a little bit bigger and swing for the fences, but in a very kind of empirical way. And so then we went out and in May of 2021 raised a fund from some angel investors, a group of kind of people in my network, $800,000, launched 26 sites, and then did the same process. And so today we are just over the 1 year mark. So we're just starting to monetize those sites, but we've basically gone from 0 to 300,000 page views a month in that period of time. So the idea is that we'll probably continue to do these types of funds and then kind of learn and iterate from each process. And we might have different flavors. What we also build into the model, like strategically exiting a certain percentage of the portfolio once they're mature. And then, some interesting economics around if you sell one site, then you can maybe launch 5 more. And then in another 6 months, you sell another site, you launch 7 more. And so you can kind of get the benefits of portfolio theory while also having like a very optimal capital allocation plan, if that makes sense.
You went through a lot of details there.
Yeah.
And I took in about 3 minutes a page of notes, which is awesome. Very strategic approach, very smart approach. If anyone's listening and wants basically a playbook on a strategic approach to do this at scale, but also diversifying in a really well thought out way, that was brilliant. So that 3-minute clip right there was brilliant. I love how you have a plan for how much of the capital you'll go in with, and then you save some capital to continue to reinvest. I love the idea that after a set period of time, you were kind of defining it as a year, you would go back and basically double down on the ones that are working well. And then, kind of had this real tangible metric you were using after 2 years, the asset had basically doubled in value. Can we get into the nitty gritty about some of the details here with some of this stuff? I just have so many things I want to ask you about. I mean, let's start by looking at niche selection. I mean, you teased it a bit, and I want to go back to the initial batch of 10 sites you started in 2019. You kind of teased about how I thought I am really good at niche selection. I thought I was really good at niche selection. How do you go about niche selection when you're looking at sites at scale? What did you learn from that? What can you share with people about niche selection that might have come through in that first round?
Yeah, well, I will caveat it by saying, look, it's an iterative process. It's a learning experience. And, as you're leveling up, you're going from level 1, 2, 3, 4 in your niche selection expertise. Google is also kind of adding levels. So you're constantly having to respond to the feedback, right? So like a lesson learned from our first incubator in 2019, the pilot program was, at that point, I was still kind of like, oh, large is good. Like we launched a site in home improvement as a category, which is a great category. In hindsight, and what I know now, what I'm excited about now is less about doing a big home improvement authority site and more about niching down to a subtopic within there, like roofing or plumbing or bathrooms or, something like that. Just because, the correct answer is, when I talked about that capital allocation plan, 120 articles is not the same in different verticals. So you have to right size the minimum viable dose of content to the vertical you're going into, right? So if you're tackling it, if you want to create an automotive site, right, about everything automotive, well, that's a massive vertical.
You maybe need 1,000 articles to even get minimally viable.
Yeah, exactly, 100%. So that's one lesson learned. And so I'll go back to the niche selection is generally it follows 3 kind of basic principles. One is, are enough people searching for it, which is, I think, been covered a bunch. It's a basket approach of keyword volume or topical volume around, categories. So it doesn't have to be like less about what's the minimum, keyword volume. It's more about what is the aggregate keyword volume for all of these keyword sets. So that's step 1. Step 2 is the competition prohibitive? So, if you have some really big players, right? And I would caveat it by saying, people would generally say that if you're competing against the wire cutter, like it's a bad niche. I would say, yeah, possibly. But getting back to this idea of right sizing your niche, I think that's a really underappreciated kind of tactic, is to really niche down and to develop topical authority. I'm a big believer in topical authority, because I've seen what topical authority alone can do without an off-page link building strategy, if that makes sense. A lot of times those two things are thrown in the mix together, and you kind of lose sight of what's causing what. But we have plenty of examples where our DR5, DR15, DR23 site is outcompeting a DR60 because the topical footprint, the topical map of our site is much more focused. But that's kind of full circle to lesson learned. If I'm trying to go into the home improvement category, the automotive category, and my plan is to cover the entire market, I better not be. I can't bring a knife to a gunfight. I gotta, the minimum viable content dose, like you said, would be 1,000 articles. To cover that, rather than going inch deep in a ton of different verticals within home improvement. So, and then the final thing is the final step is the juice worth the squeeze, and that's basically like, okay, we're ranking number one, so what? What are your ad RPMs? If you're doing display ads, what does your affiliate networks look like? So we try to do a lot of that work up front, is identifying our average RPM for that vertical, because there's plenty of interesting verticals that you can rank number one for that are, a lot less monetizable or lucrative in general. So this is again the three things: enough people searching, is there an opening in the market on the competitive side, and is there enough partners to monetize with at a decent rate.
If you were only going after, say, one site, let's say that you took the 800,000 on the most recent round, and for whatever reason, the investor team and you decided to go after one site, would you change anything about that niche research?
Yeah, man, I'd be a lot. Well, that's I'd have to be probably spend a lot more time maybe digging into some of the variables. But yeah, it would change the allocation strategy in terms of how much content we go out the door with. But it would follow a similar framework of like, I'd probably do 50 to 60% upfront, and then we look at it at like 3 levels now in terms of fire bullets and cannonballs. At the very macro level, we're looking at thematic plays. So in November, we raised $1 million. We launched 32 sites in the gaming vertical. And so we were starting to look at the map and saying, okay, there's pets, there's gaming, there's home improvement. There's certain interesting verticals we want to play with. And so now we're placing bets at a macro level. And so that's one level of firebolts and cannonballs. We have 100 plus data sets in almost every single vertical. So we have real-time data that's streaming back into our HQ about what are the good verticals, what are the RPMs in different niches, what does it actually take to rank, where are the weak spots in reality, not just in Ahrefs or SEMrush. And so we've kind of fired bullets across many different verticals, and now we want to concentrate on some really interesting verticals that we want to play with. So that's the high level. Then there's the site level of like, okay, in a cohort, even within a thematic cohort, we want to pick some different flavors, right? So, if you're in home improvement, you want to do a site about, roofing, maybe the patio, maybe bathrooms, maybe bedrooms, whatever, mid-century modern, style aesthetics, whatever, but create a bucket of sites across different verticals. And then even within the site structure, fire bullets and cannonballs, when we go out and we at each individual site level, when we launch the site, we take that, let's say 120 articles, and we'll identify our wireframe up front with our site structure, and we'll say, okay, within roofing, there's probably 4 or 5 categories we want to talk about. We want to talk about like roofing materials. We want to talk about tools. We want to talk about, trade certification, and then maybe like, lead gen services. There's 4 categories. We'll allocate the budget across those 4. And then in the initial bullet phase, and so then we'll also test on a site level where is Google showing us a sign of weakness. And let's say roofing materials is one that's weaker than the other ones. At the 12-month mark or whatever 9-month mark, when we decide to double down, we'll not only double down on the winning sites, we'll double down on the winning silos within the sites, if that makes sense.
It just sounds very strategic up front, very well planned out, very well thought out. It makes a lot of sense. Any tips that you've learned for finding maybe an untapped niche market, a vertical that isn't, like how do you identify if it's a vertical that is untapped versus not worth pursuing because maybe, it's just not something that you should bother going down?
Yeah, I mean, there's the standard advice that I think works for a lot of people, which is find low DR, competitors, find other like little, niche sites that aren't really well done that are ranking. Great. That's a good one. Finding forums or Reddit, like people have talked about that a lot. That's a good signal as well. I think the other thing that I look at though is I think a lot of people are maybe scared off about is looking at markets where there are big, dominant, massive authority sites, or big e-commerce brands or user-generated content profiles. I'm thinking like Wikipedia and its many various iterations, TripAdvisor, whatever you want to, and then basically saying, is this the right scope? And can we disaggregate this market with more focused sites, right? And so a good example I like to give is for pets. If someone came to me and said, I want to create a pet site or a dog site even, I would say, you're crazy. I mean, good luck, go do it. We've done that a couple times myself. And it's not that you can't have some success, but what I would rather do in a better return profile would be to niche down to German Shepherds and create a site about German Shepherds. I think that'd be a better return. And then I think even further, what if you niche down and do a mix, right? Like a pit bull terrier mix site, just about that. And that's an interesting way to think about hyper competitive markets and how you can compete. And I think a lot of people dismiss whole markets because, personal finance is too competitive. Well, yeah, I've seen some really interesting examples where people niche down by like single mom finance or I think it's called a white coat or investor for doctors, personal finance for doctors, or military finance. Think about how you can kind of take a big footprint, and yeah, you can't be NerdWallet, but we can definitely take one of their little silos that they'll probably not be super focused on and create a much more cohesive, coherent site that Google likes, and we can do it much more affordably.
Well, that's a great deep dive into how to pick a niche and how to go down some of these roads and how to validate a niche. I think a lot of people will maybe grab their niche and start their website and maybe go about it with a little bit more of a sporadic approach, trying to target. And I've been guilty of this before with my websites in the past. You kind of you have to pick: are you going to go down the topical focus approach, where you really, I would call that the approach you're taking, where you really flesh out a topic and you're trying to maybe go down a couple of related topics in that niche to see which one is validated via Google and via traffic down the road. But then there's also the approach of going about it by just, hey, here's my niche, and you try to target any low competition keyword you can get after in the beginning. That can work because you end up getting traffic due to the very low competition, but you can also end up with a really sporadic and chaotic approach to your topical cluster at the end, if you will. Have you ever gone down that road or seen that work well or work negatively?
Yeah, well, I famously was in that camp of the long tails, right, back in the day, and that worked for a long time. And I think it still can work. I think what it does is it kind of creates a very weak moat around your business, because if it's easy for your general kind of site to snipe that keyword, it's probably easy for a lot of other players. And oh, by the way, if a dash site finds your keyword, they'll just outrank you overnight, right? So I think the durable approach is actually even if it's a slower approach, is to go the topical authority route. I still think you can do a certain percentage of your content that is sniping, right? And in fact, if you find a lot of long tail variations like that, that's probably a very good sign about that market. But definitely, I would recommend, and what we've done is we still start with the main pillars, right? Like, look, ranking for best CRM or best web hosting, yeah, you're definitely not going to rank for that anytime soon. But still create that pillar content, right? And then have all your, have a good silo structure where you feed in at the, parent child, and then like the supporting content, informational content. Really build that out, and yeah, target some of those long tails, but try to at least map it out up front, where you can kind of say, well, there's some weakness here in long tails, but we're going to still build the infrastructure so that we can create a durable asset that won't just be wiped out, by a larger competitor coming in, or someone more topically focused kind of eating our lunch.
I love that. Yeah, a weaker moat. Yeah, you're not going to win long term as easily with that approach. You might get quicker traction though. So that's
and it's all relative too. I think like early on, my approach was I need to make money. So the cash conversion cycle, and this is maybe more like B school stuff, but I haven't gone to business school, so it's self-taught, but like cash conversion is huge. So like getting money in the door to feed more content, you have to have that trade-off with creating like 10 informational articles about esoteric stuff that's probably not going to generate a lot of revenue. I mean, that's a trade-off you have to make. And so it's really just a pathfinding exercise. but in all things being equal, I do want to go that topical focused route.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Just doing some quick math. I mean, we're talking about your 2019 incubator where you did 10 sites, 120 articles in 6 months. So that's 1,200 articles out of the gate. We're talking about May 2021, you launched 26 sites. I mean, I don't know, but that's 500 a couple thousand articles. I mean, how are you producing content at scale? And what have you learned about content at scale? Clearly, you're doing content at scale.
So this is a very important point, I think, for us, is that and where we have created some sort of moat around the operational moat, I guess, would be we have a team, we've developed a team, which is a lot of trial and error over the years of finding the right people and testing out processes and workflows. That's been huge. Amy, our COO, Victoria, our Chief Revenue Officer. So thinking about the structure of what do you need, what kind of roles functionally do you need at scale? So in our side, there's operations for our purposes is content, right? Content is our product. So that's our widget that we're producing. And on the revenue side, we have our revenue team, and they're all focused on brand partnerships. They're focused on affiliate optimization, monetization, negotiating with brands, doing promotions. And then we have, some other kind of initiatives around email marketing, social media, our tech. We have kind of a fractional CTO and some technical infrastructure that we've built, because when we're launching all these sites, we need to do it all in an organized fashion. So that necessitates some level of infrastructure. So we have basically a system. We have one-click installs. We have a base kind of setup, right, for a V1 content site where it has a certain permissions are set, certain plugins are added, certain thematic elements are included, and so we can literally spin up 100 sites in 5 minutes if we have to. Granted, they have no content on them, but that's a huge part of it, because otherwise it is a kind of a tedious process to technically set up these sites. But then I think the big thing is what we call our content conveyor belt. We had to develop some proprietary technology that would allow us to manage this entire workflow from a universal dashboard. So it took many iterations over the last 3-4 years, but what we basically have is a WordPress instance where all of our writers across all of our sites can log into, and all of our editors and all of our VAs can log into, all project managers I can log into, our team can log into, and it gives a visual overview of the entire kind of assembly line, if you will, of content from these are articles that have been pushed out, and it's kind of a self-serve buffet line. So rather than having a very kind of siloed structure where, your project manager assigns it to your editor signs, if the writer, here's your 10 articles for this month, and then the writer will respond, oh, I finished 3 of them, here they are, and then like, oh, can I get paid? We said, no, let's create a standardized process, an assembly line production floor where writers can log in. Each author profile is tagged to certain sites that they can write for, and they might have different rate per word. They might have all sorts of different variations depending on what their expertise is. They might be at 5 cents a word for whiskey and 3 cents a word for automotive or something like that. But when they go in, they just see these are the available topics that writer can see that are available to them. Then they can claim them, and there's certain rules and workflows around how long they can sit on an article, when they need to submit it. We give some flexibility, but it's basically this end-to-end management where then they submit the articles. There's different stages to the article production process. Editors come in and review it, send it back for revisions if it's needed, or approve it for the next stage. Then it gets pushed via an API integration from the central brain out to the relevant site it actually lives on. And then the formatters make sure everything's good to go. They schedule to go live. And then on the back end, this is all tracked. All the words are tracked, how much articles are getting produced per site, per portfolio, because we have different legal entities, and it generates invoices for our writers as well, so that we can go in and we can do mass payments. So right now we're using mainly Upwork, mainly PayPal and Upwork, but PayPal is our preferred option because we can do PayPal mass pay. And so with one click, we can pay hundreds of writers, and we're spending sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on content. So that's really, really key for us to be able to, generate a paper trail, tie out the loose ends so we can see the whole evolution of that article, and that each writer can go in and see for their own sake transparently, this is what I've been paid for, this is the rate per word, how many words I've written, how many articles I've written, what stage it's in, And then we have our pay cycles. We're very upfront. We pay bi-monthly, so twice a month. And yeah, it's kind of this end-to-end content management system. So that's been key for us to really scale this because it's almost it's almost like we call it our operating system, basically.
Yeah, I think that's an apt name for it. It's quite a system. Are your writers kind of freelance by nature, or are you hiring, I'll say in-house with air quotes, like are
Yeah.
they employees? I mean, how do you find these writers?
Yeah, we have some employees that say more on the kind of the management side, but for the most part, they're all freelancers. They're generally English speaking, but it can depend. We have different contingents, some in Costa Rica, for example, expat communities around the world. And, I think one distinction we try to make is we don't necessarily, we do have expert writers. We don't necessarily target hiring expert writers. We target hiring passionate enthusiasts. And then we also have a boot camp, like a training program we put them through to kind of write for the web and write for the vertical they're entering. So we much prefer raw passion and talent and real hands-on experience with a vertical versus I'm an expert copywriter and I can produce X words per minute. So yes, generally freelancers, and generally we find all sorts of passionate people that fall into our lap, and we kind of help shape them into the writer they need to be for the sites they're writing for.
Mm-hmm. How do the teams work? I mean, does an editor in your system, does an editor manage like 4 writers, or is it more open cart? You've got a bunch of writers, you've got a bunch of editors. Writers submit, editors grab articles. Project manager. I'm just curious, like how this structures a bit for people to get their minds around this thing at scale.
It's mostly assigned to on a site level, right?
Okay.
So like ideally the editors are tagged to certain sites where they have some familiarity or expertise. And then once the sites are incubated to a certain level, we do introduce what we call a managing editor to either that site, let's say it gets over 100,000 or 200,000 page views a month, that site deserves some dedicated resource that thinks about the content side, the messaging, the branding, the evaluating the writers for expertise, the kind of coordinating special projects, marketing initiatives. And then at the portfolio level, when we're doing thematics, we generally have like our gaming portfolio managing editor, right? So that's where we achieve the benefits of having a niche expert kind of it's not really a general manager because they're not doing the monetization side, but they're managing the content side, which is the product side. And so they can manage many of the sites, right, that fall under their expertise.
Right.
So that's kind of how we do it at a site or a thematic level.
Okay. Well, you tease it a bit. Let's talk about it. E.A.T, expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. The idea that Google nowadays, ever since probably about 2018 or so, wants experts writing about the content, and you have hundreds of niches you're involved in. How are you guys tackling that? Are you guys tackling it? Are you worried about it?
Yeah, no, it does. It is something we worry about. It's actually our strategic focus right now is how do we find, and it's the challenge because we actually have a really good process for finding experts. And the question really is how do we showcase those experts? And so you see all sorts of gamification right now in SEO where you might see like medical professionals, on the E.A.T profiles. And you're like, yeah, I don't think that person's real. Or like maybe it's like they're just like farming out this. They pay them like $100 a month to just get their name on the site. There's all sorts of gamesmanship. And while that's interesting, we don't want to do that, right? And so we're trying to find cost-effective ways to demonstrate E.A.T. And so kind of some of the things, obviously, like creating an about page is key. Hands-on testing is also key. And I will say that, in certain verticals that might be a cost prohibitive. And so that's something to think about up front. Is this something that you can demonstrate E.A.T with, or how can you do that? So sometimes you get a little creative with, maybe it's not sending, like if you're like reviewing HVAC equipment, like you can't send an HVAC unit to every writer, but maybe you can find writers who in their everyday life get exposure to that. Right. And so there's like this creative things you can do. We find one thing we're leaning forward on a lot is video. And it's not necessarily that, you need to create a video for every single piece of written content. From our standpoint, we need to create enough video that accurately projects the expertise of our content team, right? So, producing video is obviously a little bit more expensive than producing content. And so, even just having a YouTube channel that's featured, around and on your site, on your about page, on your homepage, on the sidebar, in different strategic places across the site. You don't need hundreds of videos. You probably just need a handful of videos to kind of demonstrate that, hey, these people know what they're talking about. And generally also moving away maybe from creating product review sites, and this is kind of a more of an esoteric shift, product review sites versus enthusiast sites. And so we're leaning on the enthusiast part. And what also helps with that is having display ad, revenue as a stream, and also doing what I call brand partnerships or hybrid approaches, where it might be some sort of affiliate hybrid with selling direct ad space to big brands. And it's a very complicated, fragmented space. But if you can do that effectively, there's big money, to be made.
Yeah.
Brands that will pay $10,000 a month just to get a featured placement across your site that gets 50,000 page views a month. I've seen that. So that's what we're also leaning into. But yeah, anyway, so back to the E.A.T stuff. Yeah, we're worried about it, and it's something we think about. But it's a combination of things. It's how do we feature it in a cost-effective way, feature video, which is a kind of short circuits the whole E.A.T cycle, because it's like, well, the person has a video, they're actually unboxing that thing. That's the ultimate signal that they know what they're talking about, right? Or at least they have been hands-on. But then also picking verticals that might not be as E.A.T intensive, if that makes sense. So probably staying away from like health and like medical advice, because that also just makes me feel uncomfortable personally. Like, even if we could game it, right? Is that really something you could sleep with yourself at night? If you're, having some generic copywriter spit out medical content and then having a doctor, paying him a few $100 to say reviewed by, but like not actually having a process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. You kind of answered one of my questions about, do you topically try to just avoid certain areas because the need for expertise is so high? I'd love to hear a little bit more about your video forays. Is that something you're testing, or you kind of really seen be a good solution to provide that expertise? I'm fascinated by the idea that maybe you don't need to become a video content hub, but you just need to add a video component to your site. And you mentioned a handful of videos and then prominently placed. How are you producing those? Are you doing that yourself, or are you actually hiring video teams to do it, or maybe incorporating your writers into it?
Yeah, well, that's the part, like, we kind of steer away from. Like, polished video production is expensive and it's generally bloated, right? And so we try to find ways where we can bring the economics down. And honestly, like maybe a credible video to me might not be highly produced. It could be a shaky over-the-shoulder iPhone video with the kids running around in the background screaming. Like, to me, that screams authenticity. Maybe it's not, I wouldn't put it on a TV commercial, but like, again, that's not
Right.
That's not what we're trying to do here. We're creating enthusiast communities, and enthusiasts are messy, right? And so that's one way to do it. And so we find that we can generally produce video for anywhere from 200 to 300, maybe a little bit more per, let's say, 5-minute segment, right? There is a different workflow involved, but it is still content. So it's a similar workflow, just a different medium. And so, yeah, we're trying to do that. And I think the easiest place to start, if you have an established site, if you have an ad network, is to look at your top content and basically say, okay, what pages are getting the highest RPMs? If I add original video, that we've seen that increase our RPMs on a page level 10, 20, maybe 25%, because ad rolls are generally additive to your page RPM. So we can basically justify the economics by knowing, look, this is already making money. We had a video, we kind of know we're going to get a boost in RPMs here. This video will pay for itself in X number of days, weeks, months. By the way, we do it with all of our content.
I love that
because that's a whole model, right? Just whatever you're putting out there, content, written content or video content, what's your payback period? And doing that analytical work to really figure out what is the rankability on my site, and when do I make my money back based on the affiliate earnings or ad earnings that I'm getting piped back into my data room. So so working on video as a, like, focusing on the high ROI things. And then, oh, by the way, you can upload that to your ad player. You can also start your YouTube channel, and you can use that same video to be another gas station in a different neighborhood on YouTube. And your YouTube hub could become self-supporting at some point. It can also be a good E.A.T signal, and it can be a good backlink source. And you can also monetize with the video, YouTube ads, which isn't great, but it's incremental revenue. And you can also put affiliate links on your description. So that's why I like video, because there's like enough overlap where if you take consistent effort, it's going to be a good ROI at some point. If someone were to tell me like, oh, you should go into TikTok, I'd be like, sure, I'll dabble, but like, I'm not, I don't think TikTok is necessarily as durable maybe than building out a video library. But you can probably still use it on TikTok. But just what's a durable trend that is similar enough to our current content production cycle?
Love it. Great tips. Great tips. I hope everybody was listening to that right there. If you're trying to crack the video nut, that might be a fantastic approach to scale it without having to spend the big bucks or the big time commit that video can feel like it's going to take. So you talk about some intricacies with your, we'll say, tech stack, with the technology that you've built up. I mean, how did you go about building some of this proprietary technology? Is it something that's, achievable for people who are running smaller sites? Or do you think it's more something that only large scale companies should try to focus on?
Yeah, I think there's certainly a breaking point, right? Where you go from your Trello board or your Asana board and then you feel like, okay, we've outgrown this and we need a higher bird's eye view. For us, that was really when we started to get past probably like 20, 30 sites. That's where I think introducing some sort of level, and I've seen it done in different ways. There's all sorts of integrations you can do with maybe like Airtable, or like even creating, like I've seen WordPress instances that kind of morphed into like a content calendar. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And so I don't think it's a requirement necessarily. But I do think if you're trying to do this at scale, and like what we're doing is trying to do it in batches, where we're like surging effort, that I think does require a technical infrastructure beyond what's readily available right now.
Yeah, it's good because obviously I'm listening thinking, oh man, I could use that. I could use that. But at the scale that I'm at, maybe a lot of the listeners at, it probably doesn't make sense until you run up against the limitations of what like an Asana, a Trello, all these different kind of more basic management systems offer. Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's good clarity.
Yeah.
Monetization. So how are you monetizing these websites? You've talked about ad revenue. You've talked about affiliate revenue. You've talked about reaching out to brands. What's monetization at scale look like with lots of different sites, lots of different niches, and a whole lot to manage, really?
Yeah, so it's a lot to manage. And so that's why we had to build a monetization team, right? Where they're really focused, they're watching that ball while we're focused on content ops or new opportunities. And so, yeah, it's affiliate revenue, which is fairly standard. We do some on Amazon. Historically, we did a lot on Amazon. Now we do a lot with brands. What that enables us to do is create partnerships and negotiate higher rates and do special promos. Just opens up a whole world of possibility. And then we have ad networks. We have Mediavine, AdThrive, Zoic, Newer Media. A lot of good good networks to have. What I like about ad networks is they kind of provide a baseline of incremental revenue across every single page. And so I use our ad RPMs as my baseline financial modeling assumption for the projections on a site. The affiliate stuff is just gravy. Some of the page level RPMs can get over $100 with, if you add in affiliate as well, $150 for some verticals. So that's great. And then I think the third part is, these hybrid kind of like direct placements with a brand. Kind of, they're not typically your affiliate managers that you want to reach out to. You want to reach out to the marketing teams, which is typically a different budget. And basically, the people that are spending money on television ads, right? Those are the people you kind of want to talk to, the ad buyers, because they operate on a whole different paradigm of brand awareness. Whereas the affiliate managers, typically they're not in-house. Sometimes they are, but even if they're in-house, they probably have their own silo. If they're not in-house, they're an agency, and agencies are incentivized usually on a CPA basis. There are a lot of things interesting happening on the agency side where the like PR and affiliate management are kind of merging, which is great for us, but it's still not quite there yet. So those are the three things. We do some digital products for some sites, but yeah, we kind of keep it simple. We don't get overly complicated by adding too many different revenue streams.
When you work directly with a brand, are you mostly with negotiating like, a private affiliate relationship, or maybe taking advantage of that affiliate relationship, and then as you grow, maybe, getting higher payouts? Or are you trying to, get direct ad placement for them on a site, banner ads, other types of monetization?
We try everything, right? It's easier once you have a defined brand partner who's driving incremental revenue, and you have traffic. The CPA increase is great because kind of you can do the pencil out the math. Be like, if I increase it by 5%, it's X dollars to me, and it's proven on the brand side because they know you're driving them sales. It's harder when it's a random brand who you haven't worked with, or something like that, and that's where we kind of push them more towards do a placement. You take some risk with us. Don't make us take the risk, because a lot of brands are happy to leverage the affiliate model because the publisher is taking all the risk, right, in producing the content, spending the money up front, getting it ranked, and then some affiliate brands are fly by night too. Like they'll be there for 3 months as a growth hack, and then they'll disappear. Once they've achieved their growth numbers, or they need to cut back their churn or whatever. So yeah, generally it's kind of taking that approach to hybrid approach, but really what's best for each brand given your existing history with them.
As we start to wrap up here, I want to ask about any advantages you see to a model like yours, where you're starting sites en masse, you're starting a lot of sites. Clearly, I think it's obvious. We know the advantages of maybe focusing on just one or just two sites, right? You get a real laser sharp focus. You get to really, move quickly, and all the advantages that come with that. But what advantages have you seen at scale like this?
Yeah, I would say unfair data advantages. Data is the moat, right? It's firsthand experience that you don't need a keyword tool to tell you how to rank. You have actual live sites, or maybe 5 or 6 sites in a vertical that are giving you their listening posts, observation posts. They're giving you real data and feeding it back. And then we call it developing unfair advantages. And then that informs our future site builds and our future reinvestment strategy. So we create relationships with brands. We have special commission rates. We identify weak points in the market. We build topical authority. We develop expert level content teams that are subject matter experts. We create libraries of video and super in-depth content. That all becomes an unfair advantage, even if typically the knock on SEO is that, it's so anyone can come in, which is true, but it's all about creating that big barrier to entry for others, but then also following what works. And so, if we find an industry we're getting sweetheart deals, let's say with affiliate managers, we'll go out and we'll say we'll own multiple gas stations in that neighborhood, right? We'll create more sites or in and around those verticals where we have those special terms.
Yeah, that I can imagine. I am basically a data management major from college. So
cool.
It just gets me so fired up to think of the amount of data you must get to look
Well, and that's what, moving forward, that's what we need, right? We need to move more into that data analytics, kind of scaling our team like that.
I will tell you, I know a lot of data analysts these days.
Awesome. I'll reach out.
I mean, as we kind of come to a conclusion here, this has just been wonderful. All the different tips you've shared, and I feel like we've really gotten to get a lot out of what you're doing. It's just been amazing. Maybe bring us back to where are some of these sites or incubators at, and any big lessons you've learned about starting so many sites, maybe if you've moved on to sell some of them now, what you've learned in the sale process, like where are these at right now? And what can you tell us about what that looks like?
Yeah, I would say like creative chaos, right? It's like there's a lot of wheels turning. It's, sometimes I wish back in the day I could just focus on 3 sites. There's certainly value to that, like you said. So I've learned a lot about, we talked about like the niche scoping of like what is the right minimum viable dose for the vertical you're entering. Just creating a model, whether it's around the competition cohort or the topical cohort, and really zeroing in on that. Fire bullets and cannonballs. I think that lesson can be applied to anyone in any, whether in your personal life or your, or your investing life or your business life or your work life. What is the minimum viable product or dose for any initiative you're trying to do, whether it's a new marketing initiative, doing email marketing, to whatever. What is the data-driven sample that you can collect And so it's like being very empirical, being very conservative to start. But then once you get that signal of like, wow, there's weakness here, go big. And so that's kind of like in certain verticals that we like, right? Find little data sets that and then do some experiments, give you some real data that you can put into projection, but then go big. And I think a lot of times people fail on both sides. They fail on the fire bullet side. They don't fire enough bullets. They don't fire big enough bullets. They don't fire any bullets. They just kind of bet on themselves and forget about the data. And then on the other side, there are people that have fired the bullets, but then don't go big enough. And so that's kind of where we're going with the big thematic portfolios. Once you have good data, go big. And so I think that would be my big lesson learned: is fire bullets then cannonballs for anything you're doing in your business right now.
Love that. What are the plans with these incubators, with these sites? We got the I don't know what you call it. I'm calling the 2019 incubator. We got the May 2021 incubator. We've got the November 2021 gaming incubator, and these are just the ones I know of from the interview here. What are your plans with them?
So I think in the future we see a lot of opportunities still. We have thousands of site concepts on the shelf and dozens of themes we want to pursue as a unified portfolio. So the question for us is, do we keep going and do individual funds, which is probably our default, and or do we at some point roll everything together? Maybe do a fundraising round, kind of become a big media company at a certain point. And so that's kind of an open-ended question. I'm not sure what the answer is. It's really the question of, well, what's the best economics for everyone, and what is, can this be reintegrated, which I think it can. But for now, we're kind of doing it step by step, fire bullets and cannonballs, doing slightly bigger portfolios in different themes. And then, at some point we may roll them all together, or we may just exit those as unique portfolios. Kind of remains to be seen. That's the process we're in right now. I'm not entirely sure what the future holds, but I know there's a lot of blue sky opportunity for us to kind of tackle.
The challenge at managing that many sites at scale is there, but I'm sure it's probably harder to grow them than it is to manage them once you get them successful. So
yes,
you've probably done a lot of the hard work. There's still a lot of opportunity to figure out, but yeah, you've probably done a lot of the hard work already here. So you figured out.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd love to be in your position, with those challenges. I guess maybe that's the best way to put it. It sounds like you've really cracked the nut on growth, and now you just got to figure out what's next. So, Whew. All right. Where can people get in touch with you, keep up with what you're doing, follow along? Like, where are you hanging out these days?
Sure. I mean, I don't have like a personal blog, unfortunately. I probably should. Spencer has it right. He made the right choice there. But I have, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And then we do have a couple kind of like services we have. We have contentteams.io, which is just like we help source a content team for you. And so that's kind of a unique offering. It's not a content agency, but it's like a recruiting headhunting firm. If you need to find expert writers, expert editors, things like that, that is relatively easy for us, but I found is very difficult for a lot of people. You can reach out, book a time, book a meeting. If you just want even just free advice, like I don't care, I'll meet with anyone because I've been there. And just feel free to reach out, LinkedIn or contentteams.io, and book a meeting. I have a calendar link there. But yeah, happy to kind of pay it forward and talk to anyone in the audience who wants to.
Well, this has been great. I definitely know I could ask questions for hours and hours. Maybe we'll catch up and maybe do a part 2 in a year or two and see where all this is at. But thanks for coming on, and thanks for sharing so much. So many people on this that listen to this podcast are basically website builders, affiliate marketers, side hustlers. And so to hear the way you're approaching it and the way that you've cracked scale is really great. And even for the people who are listening who have no aspirations of growing something this large, there's just so many gold nuggets that you can learn from people who are doing it at scale, because there's so many things you've learned and figured out that we'll never maybe see with 1, 2, or 3 sites. So many things that I think that there are here to take from, even if you're not building or have aspirations of building, a lot of websites.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Yeah, it's good stuff. And thank you so much for doing this, by the way. I still listen to the Niche Pursuits podcast after all these years.
It's great. It's great. Well, hey, thanks so much, Ewan. And until we talk next time.
All right. Cheers.
Have you been frustrated with your Google traffic lately? Are you tired of tools that make you search through millions of keywords and require a math degree to figure out? There's an SEO tool called RankIQ that can help. They're ranked number 1 on G2 for both ease of use and customer satisfaction. RankIQ gives you a list of the lowest competition, high traffic keywords in your niche, and they're all clear winners. When you choose one of their handpicked keywords, their AI takes over and gives you a simple report telling you what Google wants you to cover in your blog post. Whether you have a new site or have been around for a while, RankIQ will take your Google traffic to a whole new level. Go to rankiq.com/niche pursuits to lock yourself in at 50% off their monthly rate. I'll put this special link in the episode's description. Hey, Jared here. Today's episode is sponsored by onelittleweb.com, a bespoke link building service provider trusted by hundreds of niche site business owners just like you. One Little Web manually handpicks real and relevant sites for guest post backlinks that receive at least 5,000 monthly organic visitors from Google. The best part is that you can check the quality of the sites and approve or ask for replacements until you get the desired domains for your guest posts. So we've arranged an exclusive welcome offer for Niche Pursuits listeners, where you'll get a free DA40 backlink on your first order of a DA50 backlink. So again, you'll love One Little Web because A, they guarantee guest post backlinks with 5,000 plus monthly organic traffic sites. B, they let you review the sites beforehand and approve them. C, they write a 1,000-word, well-researched content post for every single guest post. So go to onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits to claim your free DA40 backlink today. Again, that's onelittleweb.com/niche pursuits.